So my name is Shanti. I am the founder of the Silence the Shame movement. I'm very excited to be here the second year participating in A3C action. This is a very important topic, so give it up for yourself for being here today. So in the interest of time, because we only have an hour, and we really want to get to questions and audience Q&A as well, I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick intro. First, I would like to welcome my friend Kawan Prather, who I have known over 25 years now. We pretty much started in the industry together, but he started as an artist and now is an executive and DJ and president of I Am Other for Pharrell. So, I Am Other Music, yes. So give it up for KP. Next to my left, this gentleman right here needs really no introduction. He is a Grammy Award-winning artist, speaker, philanthropist, just all-around good person, SWAT's community member. Give it up for CeeLo Green, everybody. To my right, I'm excited that my dear friend, Dr. Ayanna Abrams, is here. She is a licensed clinical psychologist. She sees patients all throughout the Atlanta community. She's very active in the mental health and wellness space in Atlanta, Georgia, and someone that you definitely want to get to know after the event. So give it up for Dr. Abrams. To Dr. Abrams' right and your left, we have one of my new friends, Dr. Sultan. He is currently the president-elect of the Georgia Psychiatric Physicians Association, which is the local chapter of the American Psychiatric Association. So he is a psychiatrist, and I thought that it was important today that we had representation with a licensed clinical psychologist as well as a psychiatrist. So for those of you that don't know, a psychiatrist, they go to medical school, right? And they're able to prescribe medication. A psychologist does more talk therapy, and fill me in if I'm wrong, but psychologists cannot prescribe medication. And so because we're talking about substance abuse and mental health, I wanted to make sure that we had the right professionals. So give it up for Dr. Sims. And unfortunately, Caleb Brown, who is a wonderful new artist, really making a buzz in the marketplace right now, he was driving to town and his car had a blowout. So unfortunately, he sends his regrets, but make sure you guys look up Caleb Brown. He's an awesome young man. All right, so we're going to jump right in. One thing that is for sure, you cannot talk about substance abuse and not talk about mental health. Oftentimes, people use drugs and alcohol excessively to mask their problems of depression, stress, anxiety, loss of a job, financial hardships, and so forth. That's why we really wanted to bring this conversation to the forefront today to kind of talk about how it's affecting folks in the entertainment industry. And in the music industry, we certainly hear of a lot of rappers and musicians talking about drugs, alcohol, lean, perp, I don't know all the words, but Molly, there's so many terms that are out there. But you hear about it in their lyrics, and we often see that played out in real life with them as well. So I want to pose this question to either KP or CeeLo. Why do you think that a lot of entertainers are turning to drugs to cope? Are they embarrassed to share if they have issues going on? And I know that the stigma is still very prevalent just in society overall when you talk about mental health and wellness and people not wanting to tell anyone that they may need help.
Let me start by saying I acknowledge everyone here. I appreciate everyone coming with a genuine interest. That interest does, and of course, gives us a greater chance at an intervention. So I just thank everybody for coming to learn, and the more information we can share, the quicker the student can become a teacher. You know what I'm saying? So to answer your question,
I just talk like this all the time. It's crazy.
So to answer your question, I believe that there may be another level of significance. I think it would be easy to assume that drug use and the glorification of it is masking some deeper, darker, unaddressed emotional state of being or mental state of being. Mm-hmm. But I believe that some of the artists are perpetuating it onto themselves because it's as if the creative, it's like in search of a chemical conduit for creativeness.
A superpower.
Right.
It's like it's the Lex Luthor superpower.
Absolutely.
As opposed to just, honing, sometimes
Right.
taking the hard work. Which is, and this is the thing, we gotta acknowledge that being in front of people, telling your truth is hard.
Yes.
So imagine doing that every night in front of 50,000 people. That's 100,000 eyes looking at you, waiting on you to do something.
Right.
So I can imagine.
No, absolutely. No, thank you for letting me elaborate. Because it's a big story. There's a large narrative to try to break down. But no, sobriety is such a singular thing. You want to be a part of the society. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's initiated because of peer pressure sounds so juvenile. It's not peer pressure, but
Circumstance, circumstance seems cool.
You know what I'm saying? People, they want that inebriated experience to source the information. You know what I mean? Like to source the song, or or the storyline, or what have you. So I think that you don't realize it's an issue until it's an issue.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's not okay to, partake in, whatever you enjoy, but it's when we see these extreme,
There's a difference between drug abuse
exactly.
and drug abuse.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot of it is the lack of understanding of the difference. Because if it's in a song, it sounds fly. So a lot of times people who don't necessarily know what the original reason for using it is, they miss that whole point in that process.
Can we bring our licensed healthcare professionals in? What do you think about that? Oh, I'm sorry, you had
I
another
also
question?
wanted to say that,
Okay.
a lot of times, the artists, they also want to be introduced to themselves. They want to.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well,
Like you can be told, you could like if you
become
watch
this
the
alter
doors,
ego.
Okay.
yeah,
Superpower.
Gotcha.
You become this other thing, and people want to test the grounds to see if I'm more social.
in the artist standpoint.
Right. If I'm more creative. If I'm more, my personality is right. I mean, people want to be.
Do they like me more?
Do they like me more? And sometimes that does happen. I mean, and it's you lose that fear. You know what I mean? Or that inferiority complex. You count it, and then the wanting to be your alter ego or your representative. That becomes the addiction. So you become addicted to that feeling or the effect. You know what I'm saying? And the identity crisis ends up being, the source of the problem, the core of the problem.
Dr. Abrams, can you talk about, though, the dangers, right, of that becoming an addiction and that habit?
You both mentioned so many different points around how oftentimes you might use drugs to enhance feelings, so to get more creative, to be able to stay up longer, right, in some ways, to be able to be more fun, right, to be around people, but also looking at ways in which drugs are used to numb things so that you can also be in those feelings, right? So if I'm my alter ego, I don't have to maybe deal with stuff that's going on in my personal life. I get to be this person who is fun, who is the life of the party, who, again, can stay up all night, can do the lyrics, be in the studio time for whatever length of time, to be social in a lot of ways, just to be able to be around people, and that's where it can become a problem, when you're using it to not feel something else. So oftentimes when we're looking at substance use that turns into substance abuse, it's around issues of anxiety, social anxiety. When it comes to musicians, performance anxiety is huge, right? Talking about being on stage. When it comes to, again, kind of avoiding things or kind of masking things that are going on socially for you. In order for me to be in a room with this particular person, I need to be high, I need to be drunk, I need to be this. So again, it kind of takes on a life of its own where now I can only be in this space if I'm doing this thing. And that's when it turns into more abuse.
Dr. Sam, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would say people really need to be careful. Many times people have an underlying mental health condition. You can have a whole host of people who try these drugs, and not everybody's going to develop some of the problems that you see happen. We were just talking about, being in the studio, creating things, being up all night, being very positive, having an elevated mood, increased goal-directed activity, impulse. These are symptoms of mania. That's a part of bipolar disorder. Now, I'm not saying everybody who's experiencing that is manic, But if you have an underlying condition and you start down that path, what inevitably happens is things start to fall apart. All of that creativity can progress to racing thoughts. You can start to get overwhelmed. You can start to have problems at home and at work and at school. And things start to break down, and then you'll hear some accounts of what happened to people. They end up in the hospital. There are a lot of people who like to think that these drugs, if I have a breakdown, let's say, and it started with me using drugs, well, maybe if I just stop taking those drugs, everything will be fine. But that's not always the case. If you have an underlying mental health condition, now even when you take those drugs away, we see down the line a recurrence of these type of episodes, and life can really just go downhill. And part of when you're manic is you feel you're great. Well, something we call grandiose ideation. It's not me. Everyone else has a problem. Look at all the success I have. Look at all the things that I can do. And it can be very difficult to get through to that person to say, you have a problem. Even when things start to break down, that person is still not able to see that they have a problem. So it's important for all of you to kind of learn about that, for all of us to get educated. And the people who are most likely to break through to a person are someone that person loves. Someone
The
who
crew, the
that person
homeboy, who
cares
really shouldn't be
about.
the manager, but is the manager.
Day one, as you say today, day ones.
Someone that, and it's tough. It's tough. Even your best friend, your siblings, maybe trying to get through to you, you need to be patient. You need to persist. It can take time to get through to people. So it's important to be armed with the information so that
Dr. Sims, you talked about some of the symptoms of mania, right? The ups and downs and highs and lows. And, we've seen that kind of play out with one of our beloved entertainers, Kanye, recently. And I think all of America is trying to kind of figure out, are his rants a result of his bipolar 1 disorder? Or is it just, Kanye's big personality, right? Kanye being Kanye, and I know you posted the other day, CeeLo, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. One thing I can say is I have a family member that suffers from bipolar 1 disorder. He's 30 years old right now. It first reared its head when he was 18. And he started using K-12, which is a synthetic weed. And he's a creative. KP, you've met him, my nephew, and extremely talented, but he already had that chemical imbalance, like you mentioned, and I was always afraid to allow him, and that could be good or bad, right? Because I can't stop anybody's dreams, but I was afraid to bring him around the industry and the studios, because I know he couldn't handle that, right? And then on the flip side of that, I know a lot of people, when they do suffer from mental illness, and there is a difference, because we all have mental health, we may not have a mental illness. So if you're taking these medications, most people don't like the way that the medication makes them feel. So a lot of the artists self-medicate as a coping mechanism because they automatically feel better, but all that's doing is putting a Band-Aid on it. And I was actually in Los Angeles yesterday and was talking to a couple of artists out there, and they were just saying that they had seen Kanye when he is medicated, and he's really, subdued and not creative. And so it's tough, right? Because if you are this creative, like you said, and you want to be able to be that person and to be respected and to put out the best material, but it's like you can't also give up on healing yourself. That's why that education in this space is so important. I know for some people, talking to patients, it takes a year or two, even longer, to find the right mix of medication. And medication may not be for everybody, right? And we'll get into that, but there are ways to cope. But I just kind of want to get you guys' thoughts on Kanye and that situation. I know you're not mental health experts, but you're in the creative community, and I just kind of want your thoughts on that, because I do see the signs and symptoms, and we've heard him say in interviews, he wants to normalize the conversation around mental health and dispel a lot of the myths.
I think the root of, I hope the root of it is based in the advancement of the conversation, right? So you hear somebody who is smart, he's done smart things, he's done things that you really are connected with. So there's a person there, right? So there's a point where you have to understand that some of the experiences he's had, none of us have had. So it's really, really difficult to try to normalize all the rest of it without knowing all the silly shit that comes. So I kind of just listen for the parts that make sense, so I kind of get a grip in it, right? But I don't try to, like the doctors on the other side, I don't don't know, other than I can imagine it's extremely confusing, and especially when now you have the access to put out every brain fart, every thought, every idea at the moment you have it, as opposed to going through what might have been your crew and be like, yo, how about this? Man, fuck out of here with that. Like, he might not have a no man now because he has a phone and all this access, and we keep asking for it. So why would he stop? It's like, it's such a weird cycle, because if he stops, then what?
And so we're a part of their problem as well.
Yeah, we're all addicted to the same thing. It's like we're addicted to other people's pain and attention and their need for it. You know, it's like, it's the reason why we go pay. Like, you wouldn't go pay, the reason why you go pay and watch Kanye every time he shows up is because something's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You're waiting for the thing to happen.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of really, really talented artists out here who are really kind of boring that you don't go see them, but if you listen to them, they're probably saying something you need to hear. But Kanye's understood that it needs a spectacle as well. So now, where's the line? Like, and you guys kind of make it because
Where's
of
that
fans.
balance
Like,
for him?
yeah, like, but how do you find a balance if people keep accepting more?
I want to add that I can appreciate that we have action summits like this because it brings the community into that. There are ways in which when artists are doing the things that we like them doing, they're a part of the community. But now because Kanye is acting in ways that we don't like, we're ready to cancel him. Right? And how that happens so immediately and how that happens so quickly versus viewing Kanye as part of the community. Even if we're upset and confused and don't understand, I can't diagnose him from here, so don't ask me. I don't know what's going on. But at the same time, recognizing how we all have a part of this. Because typically when somebody shows up with a mental health issue, we begin to hear them immediately, which actually makes their mental health issue worse. That feeling of isolation factors into people who are down, need to kind of more self-medicate to be in spaces because they don't know, again, what people are waiting for them to do wrong or where the hype is going to be, right? So we all have a responsibility when anybody shows up in some way that is very different than they used to. And I'd even go back further, again, I can't diagnose him with Kanye, that people want to recognize that there's grief going on there. So people are just looking at the last few years, but we need to be looking at the last 15 years with people. And we miss a lot of cues. Again, we tend to pay attention when something goes off or when something goes wrong. But as long as Kanye was making music that we liked, nobody had anything to say about it. But it's now when we're talking about Trump, we're in a hat and all of that stuff, right? Now people have a problem.
If you think about the fact that what we liked about him and what the lyrics and everything that we got along with were the problems. They were the struggles, they were all the things. But, okay, we know that we align with him in that space, but we don't. Again, we didn't get the rest of it. So it's like, it's that part just really kind of bothers me in the disposable way that we throw our artists and our creatives and just people who have done something for us, people in general.
We can use what's going on with him as an example.
Exactly.
I'm not speaking on Mr. West, I haven't evaluated him, but.
Make note of that.
Right.
Document.
See, I
And
said
no one's
that-
agreed
said that a couple of
or
times,
disagreed.
yeah.
I agree with all falls
We
down.
got rules against that, but sometimes when people are in the midst of an episode or a crisis, they may say things that you don't like. They may behave in ways that you don't like. They tend to have issues with relationships, interpersonal, intimate relationships. So let's try to continue to love those people. Let's try not to just turn our backs on them, especially when we know that there might be something going on. Let's try to stick with those folks, wrap our arms around them, and try to engage them, encourage them to get the help that they need. So
CeeLo, did
we
you
can
wanna
use
add?
that as an example.
Absolutely. Yeah, to carry on from the point that KP made a little earlier, he was saying that, like, you know, us as the audience, we live vicariously through the artist. You know what I'm saying? Because we have yet to sort ourselves out, and so we're looking for some sense and some sensibility through the song, you know, or a statement, you know, or celebrity. And I think that that's unfortunate. I think that that's an ill of society too. I think that there's a bit of sickness there too. And I also think that music has a healing property, and I think that it's a means to be cathartic sometimes too. It goes back to the reason of why some people do self-medicate, because they do realize that pain and anguish is often some of the best music we've ever heard. So they think that they can maybe, you know, to harness it and you know.
Yeah, like a Thanos glove.
Right, exactly. But as far as Kanye is concerned, I believe that there's some degree of a reverse psychology. I think that he would much rather us become more certain of ourselves and not as certain or dependent on him. You know what I'm saying? And I do believe that there is some type of satire. You know what I mean? Like, you know, they use that word when you try to culminate comedy and politics and music, and like so satire, if you understand. And I think that's what it is. I hope that's what it is. Yeah, absolutely. You know, but like I said, I don't believe that he is completely delusional. You know what I mean? I think that he has a point, and I think that he's not. I don't think he's articulated himself as well. I don't think he's been given an opportunity. I think there's so much to say. If you can
I
imagine,
agree.
Can you imagine that an artist of that magnitude? Just imagine his sheer creative capacity. You know what I mean? Like, you know.
Think if Prince put out every song he thought.
Right.
Like it's the equivalent of some of those songs they're not dope.
And trying to internalize that. I mean, like, so without the outlet, it's probably a little bit of it's healthier for him to be able to lash out in such a way. And he's given us the references. He's given us the reasons of why. You know, he's been diagnosed bipolar. You know, these are the areas in which we can, as the viewer, or you know, can find the empathy. You know, like, to be more patient and trust the process.
Kanye has a song named Anxiety, doesn't he? Where he's in the video sitting in a corner having like a panic attack. Like that's him saying, this is what I'm experiencing.
But without the outlet, you know, someone, and we can speak because we're creatives as well. So without the outlet, he would have imploded a long time ago. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's unfortunate that he's growing in front of us on the world stage. That's what's so vulnerable and so you know, can be, you know, at a large detriment, you know, to someone that's highly
So CeeLo's making me think of balance. You know, we're around a college campus. It's very stressful. People get off into their lives. You're working. There's a lot of stress going on. Stress is the enemy of your mental wellness and mental health. So when you don't have that balance, you use the word outlet. When you don't have that outlet, you have to cultivate these things. You have to develop and figure out what's the outlet for you. What are the things that you like to do to relieve stress? How do you kind of get out of your mind and out of the day-to-day, that the rat race or whatever rut you can get caught up in? How can you create balance in your life? And we'll probably talk about medicine later, but there's no medicine that really can give you balance in your life. It can help to level you out and allow you to work on developing that balance and those outlets. But we really need to understand that we need to have that balance to stay mentally well throughout our lives. College is like prime time for people to have because it's so stressful and there's so much pressure. So again, going back to that concept of balance, I think it's important.
So,
and then there's a third part too. You have math, science, and spirituality. You know what I mean? Like sometimes we don't have faith of that core from the memory. You know, there's no sense of self.
absolutely.
So the loss of the illogicality is bilateral. It goes forward and backwards. Like you're trying to weigh the balance, but it's difficult to do or be anything definitive.
I agree. So, you know, we see the artists like a Chris Brown or you know, even Wayne, and, you know, talking about it. Even for executives, you know, it's really tough. You know, I was an executive in the entertainment industry for over 25 years, I think now. You know, I just released my book called Silencing My Shame, sharing my story because my father took his own life when I was 7 months old. And 3 years ago, I came really close to taking my own life. It's nothing I'm proud of. I didn't want to die, but I wanted the pain to stop. I couldn't find that balance in my life that I needed. And one of my mentees, Felicia Fant, who's in the room, shout out to Felicia, and Janae, who just walked in, two powerful women. But, you know, it's so much pressure on men and women, and especially the women. And a lot of the stuff that I had to endure as a woman, hashtag Me Too, hashtag a lot of other stuff, getting paid, you know, less than, some of my male counterparts, not you per se, KP. But, it was really difficult. And so when I found myself getting more and more stressed out, I didn't like the person that I was becoming. I was giving, 24 hours a day to this industry and not taking time for myself. And so when my mom developed her Alzheimer's, that's when I kind of quit and walked away. But I finally started unmasking all those layers of depression and anxiety from learning about my dad's suicide. Like, I just want us to, and I know it's difficult, right? But we have to find a way to get to the executives in the business, the creative community, so that they can normalize this conversation. And, excuse my language, you gotta fuck with yourself at some point, right? You gotta take care of you. And you gotta know that everybody's not your friend, and that's okay. And it took me a long time to realize that too. I have some friends in the entertainment industry that are lifelong friends, but I also have some people that are acquaintances, and I also know that if that job ends tomorrow, I probably won't hear from a lot of those people. And that's okay, but I still have my moments of even dealing with that. Like now, starting this movement, hell, I went from making almost $500,000 a year, corner office, to a mental health advocate. That ain't sexy. Like, for most people, let's just keep it real. So I'm scrolling through, my highlight reel, looking at my peers, still president of this, EVP of that, and as I'm still healing myself, it's difficult. So I had to kind of change and shift my circle of trust and friends, and so that's why I just hope that some of these artists that we are talking about, and even if they are kind of loosely mentioning it, that their circle of trust or friends are looking out for them. And whether it's getting medication or self-care or whatever you need to do, you gotta take care of your mental health. We all have it. It's mind, body, and soul. It's not just your body. And guess what? If one is not right, the other one is not gonna be right. So it's just so important that we have these conversations, especially in the entertainment industry, because it's a fast-paced industry. You look at Shakir Stewart and the late Chris Lighty, and most people were like, those were two guys out of anybody in business. They never in a million years would have thought that they would take their own lives. And sometimes, you guys can allude to this, that you may not have been predisposed to a mental health, illness, and suicide could be spur of the moment. I mean, I'm grateful by the grace of God. I'm sitting here today in front of y'all, but I had figured out how I was gonna take those pills. I had planned out my funeral. I was done. But hip-hop has helped me build this movement along with my amazing Silence the Shame team. And so I know people are interested. I know they're hurting. Like some of my colleagues in the business who I don't ever talk to, they be sliding in my DM like, can we talk tomorrow?
It's a different slide.
I ain't talked in 100 years.
Like, it's for real.
But you know what I'm saying? And I'm like, wow. And of course I'm gonna help. And it's actually making me happy to see that, this movement is happening, even though it might not be that sexy on my timeline. People are paying attention, and hopefully we're able to save lives.
Well, I think in the executive part, that people don't, well, first of all, it looks so cool to be busy and traveling.
And hashtag no sleep.
Yeah, and you know what, that's kind of what it is. Like, if you think about it, a lot of us have learned wrong. It's like, grind to, ball till you fall, grind,
and I do that.
no sleep. And it's like that's like, imagine what Ricky Bobby felt like when he found out his dad was drunk when he said, if you're not first, you're last. It's the same thing. It's like we're trying to live up to something that's not real based on someone who hadn't figured it out yet, telling us what they're doing at that moment. So now we're all following this I guess like hamster wheel of just like nothingness, because like you end up not doing any things that you could be doing to get to the place that you actually thought you wanted to be at.
And when you get to the place, you can't even enjoy it because you're so depressed, you're so anxious, you're so isolated, right, that it doesn't mean the same thing. So what do you try to do? You try to do more, right? That's the rat race.
What are some
Because
symptoms
what are
of
you gonna post
depression?
tomorrow after you win the Nobel Peace Prize?
And I also think it's a big attack on the youth. I think sometimes when we talk about the politics of industry and the various ones, the sports industry, I mean, we have some greats of whom we thought were great. We thought that they were naturally great and endowed with a gift from God, if you will. And then they are then exposed to have used some sports enhancement, you know what I mean? And I think it's an attack on your own natural, inclination, you know what I mean, like to be empowered, or be whole as yourself. You know what I'm saying? And I just, because we depend too much on the validation and the status quo that have been set by other individuals who could have very well you know, what's that man's cultural or whoever, you know what I'm saying? But I think that that's also reverse psychology too, that should be at least, you know, incorporated into the larger conversation.
Symptoms of depression and anxiety, because somebody in this room may be experiencing something and not even know what it looks
And
like.
not recognizing it, right? So oftentimes by the time somebody who has depression makes it to my office, the criteria we're typically looking at is, and the main things I look for are changes in appetite, right? So either eating too much, eating too little, changes in sleep, sleeping too much, sleeping too little. I'm looking for substance use and abuse. And I'd also like to kind of point out that oftentimes when we're talking about substance abuse amongst artists, musicians, rappers, we're looking at quote unquote the harder drugs, Molly, the things you listed. But I'm also looking at alcohol and weed, right? I can't tell you how many times I have conversations with people who think you can't be addicted to weed, right? And what we're
Can you
looking
say that again?
You
And
can
I'm
be
not
addicted to
I'm
weed.
all for you getting your little high on it, that's what you enjoy, but
But
it
you
can
can't be
be a
addicted
problem.
to weed, right? And what we're looking for is in any use of these substances, is it affecting other areas of your life negatively? Occupationally, relationally, financially, we're looking at whether it crosses a threshold. And that's the difference between recreational use and when it turns into dependency, abuse, tolerance, addiction. We're looking at what's not working well when you're using this. So you might say, well, no, I've never gotten a DUI, so I'm not alcoholic. I've never been violent, so, you know, I don't have a problem. But are you fighting? Are you losing your friends in some way? Do you feel terrible the next day after you drink and after you have a hangover? Are you having blackouts, right? So we're looking for this different criteria, and what I've seen over time is that we've upped the ante on what is a problem, right? So if I'm not, again, getting in trouble, getting in legal trouble, losing my family, losing my house, something like that, then I actually don't have a problem. If I'm not violent, I don't have a problem. And we really have to pay attention that there are criteria way before that when it comes to having a problem with substance use.
You know what, I was just about to say something similar to what you're saying. You know, you think about Lynn Bias or somebody or any other individual who has tried something recreational for the first time and had their mind blown, was never the same. You know, that almost kind of like separates mice from men. And the next person can say, well, okay, then since I've been able to do it time and time again, go to this place, come back, go to this place, come back, I must be built for it. You know what I'm saying? You feel me? And it becomes an esteem, and it maybe becomes an accomplishment to be an
That's
addict.
that rock star
You know what I'm
shit.
saying? Yeah, it's rock star.
It's that living that line, you know, and I think the mentality isn't just for artists, it's for
Oh, yeah.
anybody who's required to perform more consistently than anybody else.
Thank you.
And if they do it, they really believe, you know, like a lot of us as creators, we have moments where we can go. It's just our time, it's that zone, right? But when you're not in the zone, people expect that zone from you the whole time.
All the time.
Or else you fell off. And the fall off is what or the fear of fall off is what's killing most of it, because that's the anxiety in the executive space. Like we are, and this is the weirder part for executives, you're required to do as much work, put in as many hours, be at all the same places for about this much a percentage of the finance, right? So that means you know you can't afford to take care of yourself the way that you are taking care of other people. So when you think about Shakira, you think about Chris, they're taking care of some of the biggest artists on the planet. But for 10% of what the biggest artist on the planet makes. So you got the same stress, but you have to figure out how to deal with that, and that's where a lot of the other problems start.
So
So-
you figure out we look like we having fun.
You wanna add
I was going to add to depression. I think really there's power in knowing those symptoms and being able to recognize them. A couple other ones, I think you mentioned impaired concentration, decreased energy. Look for behaviors, social withdrawal. I think you mentioned inability to enjoy things that are normally pleasurable. So as you start to see these symptoms creeping up and starting to grab hold of you, that's when it's time to ask for help. Help is available. It's out there. There are people out there who are trained to help you. We can't help you if you don't ask for help, if you don't seek help. And too many times in our families and our communities, we don't encourage people to get help. We encourage people to push through it or to move past it or to pray a little more. Which prayer is good. I'm not speaking against prayer. That's part of that balance that we talked about, having that spiritual balance. But sometimes for some people, it's not enough. And don't ignore the genetic component. Shanti, you mentioned a family member. We see that mental health conditions there is a genetic component. You may have some people who kind of out of nowhere, you didn't see it coming and something impulsively happened, or they're stricken with depression and you can't identify anybody else in their family who had depression, but many times you can. There's a first-degree relative, an aunt, a grandparent with schizophrenia, a mom with depression,
Uncle
a
Pete,
sister,
everybody know Uncle Pete.
you know, Uncle Pete.
Nobody talks
that
about.
nobody talks
in a
to.
room.
Don't ignore that, and you need to think about that when you're deciding whether or not I'm gonna start drinking or smoking marijuana and experimenting with drugs. Maybe you're a little bit more at risk of developing real problems than the average person who maybe doesn't have that genetic predisposition.
Because I'll be honest, like when I was going through my heavy depression in 2015, you know, I'm good for a little cocktail. You know, I come home after a hard day, one, but then when one turns into two, and two turns into three, and it's party of one, like ain't nobody at the crib but me, that's a problem. And so I had to take a hard look at that.
Yeah, I pay attention to stuff like that because we're in a culture where it's okay to drink when you have a hard day, right? It's so infused in the culture. It's all over our clothes and our shirts. It's wine time. It's, you know, all this stuff, right? That's self-medication right there, right? Even if it's at a mild or a moderate level. I have clients who come in and say, yeah, I just have one drink every single night after work, right? So I already have my ears and kind of my eyes open to that because you're already using it to regulate something because you're stressed out at work, or, you know, I just drink every night to go to bed. I hear that a lot, right? So you're now already kind of regulating this biological process. Your body should be able to go to sleep on its own. But now you've equated that to, well, I can't sleep without wine. I don't eat unless I'm high, right? Those are things that make it into my office that tells me, okay, now we're a little bit past recreation. Now we're looking at some kind of dependency. Right? And one thing I wanted to add that's very clear on my intake is that I have a question that says, has anybody in your life ever told you that you have a problem or that they're worried about you? That's another way to kind of get my clients kind of involved in, okay, well, somebody else has told me something, and based on their answers, we can have a totally different conversation. Because oftentimes, other people notice stuff before you do, right? But denial comes in. When somebody says, hey, last night you were this or this, or I've noticed this over time, denial is the first thing that typically pops up for people. So I want to know if there's been anybody in your life who has ever said at any point, hey, you got to watch out for that. Because that gives me some different information about it being more noticeable than maybe you're able to connect to.
So the last question that I'll bring up, and then we're going to open up for Q&A because we only have an hour. We're going to stay on schedule. I recently read an article talking about some of the symptoms and everything that producer Lex Luger had gone through. And he was sharing his story of how his own drug and alcohol abuse were major contributors to his mental health decline. He started suffering from depression, and then, you know, when he got those hit records, everybody called him wanting that same beat. You know, and that pressure just really got to him. And, you know, I'm proud to say he's sober now. I don't know him, but just from reading. And so he realized that it was affecting his life. It was affecting his family. He wasn't able to really spend time properly with his daughter. So how can we have those conversations? Because how many times, you know, and some of it's just, you know, it's normal, right? You see someone, a family member in the morning, or, you know, colleague at work, and you say, hey, how you doing? Oh, I'm good. And you just kind of go along about your day. But how many times have you saw somebody that didn't look that good and you go, no, how are you really doing, right? How do you start those conversations so that we can help some of these people in the industry, in our families, in the communities to heal? Because a lot of people just don't even know how to ask that question.
I got one, right? Because it irritates me when people ask me how am I doing and start talking. Like, but the thing is, just take,
you really don't
the first step is just take the time, like how you doing? Wait.
Yep.
Like, and then go, like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Bothered me, I'm sorry.
So how can we have these conversations? It's really about not being judgmental in your approach. Don't attack people. You attack someone, you're going to be on the defensive immediately. If you judge someone, there's immediately going to be a negative response to you. So, you know, be tactful, be mindful in how you approach people and engage in these conversations. Try to point out to them what you see. You know, people sometimes will say, well, you don't know, you don't really know what's going on. Well, you're right, but I can tell you what I see. I see you're not behaving in the same way. I see you're not the fun person that you used to be. I see you're up all hours of the night. I see that, you know, you're real cranky and irritable. You're not going to work. You're in your room. You have obligations. You're not meeting these obligations. I think in terms of those one-on-one conversations, I think that's what we need to do. But also, I think we need to do more to promote a broader conversation, like we're doing today. We have people who are respected and loved. We got CeeLo up here, who's an international superstar. When you hear him up here and he's talking about something like this, I think it's going to go a little bit farther than Dr. Sims, who I got a nice little education, but I'm not an international superstar. So you hope that as people who are out in the public and who can touch lives, the more we have those people have those conversations, I think the more it opens the door for those women.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd even add to that.
But I was about to say, we need the whole, like that, like it's what we call in the entertainment business a super group. It's like we have a front man, and there's substance all
Yes.
around it.
Absolutely.
And we have to represent the relationship between church and state. I said to also have that conversation. Come with your humanity. Use compassion to convey your virtue and your vice. Because someone's addiction may be different from yours, and we all have one. So, someone's addiction is alcohol. Your addiction could be IG. You know what I'm saying?
As I check.
Well, your addiction is on being on IG, watching them be on drugs.
You know what I'm saying?
That's real tough.
We gotta be able to recognize, where we stand.
Let me just mention the body and the brain and how these drugs affect people. We're still figuring that out. Science doesn't know 100% how these drugs affect your body. I've treated people who came into my office, they've been abusing meth, crystal meth. And I just feel like I don't know what I can do to help some of those people. You look at them and you are like, wow, this person may never be the same again.
But who has the audacity to try that shit in the first place?
Hey, why? We want people to think about, why am I doing this? That's another big thing. But your liver, drugs are broken down in your liver. Your kidney, everything that goes through your body gets cleared through your kidney. You can have long-term physical ailments as a result of your drug use. Alcohol, people get dehydrated. When you detox from alcohol, you can die. There's something called delirium tremens. You can have seizures. You can die.
We've seen the seizures from the lean.
So you can die. So it's important for people. I don't know if it seems like all the information's out there, but it's important for people to understand as you're starting to take part in these things. And we don't know. We got all these people out here dying from opioid overdoses. We don't know what's in those drugs. There's fentanyl in there. Those folks didn't sign up for that. They didn't know that this super killer, super strong anesthetic was going to be wrapped up in this opioid or in heroin, and they're dying. So think about how these things can potentially impact your body before you partake.
Even a lot of the marijuana, there was a story I just heard that you're seeing more and more cases where it's not pure. For a lot of people on the street, if you don't really know where you're getting it from, right, for the average person.
But in terms, I just want to say something real quick. In terms of our,
Dealers out there trying to compensate for quality.
So we only have 10 minutes left. I'm sorry.
no, I was just going to add that, as we hear that there's kind of an opioid crisis, recognizing that there's been an opioid crisis, right? So in terms of us taking care of our community and us taking care of who we are and kind of who we want to be, we have to recognize that it's probably going to come from us, right? Opioid crisis has been there. It's now called opioid crisis because it's reached white suburbia, but it's been here. Right? So we have to take that seriously.
Thank you for that. Okay, we're gonna open up quickly. Any questions? And please make it a question. Come to the mic real quick and not a statement, because we literally have only 10 minutes, because the Bout About It crew, Master P and his folks are coming in next. I think so. Okay. State your name and your question real quick. We'll try to get through as many as we can.
I'm Terrell, and I'm a social media influencer and pop culture writer and critic. And in February 21st, we hosted a panel with Nicole and J.R. Bland
And Carrie Hilson.
Carrie Hilson.
Yes.
One of the things Carrie Hilson said is that when people ask us how are you doing, we always say I'm fine, I'm good. We never think that we start taking those opportunities to check on ourselves.
Sure.
So I'm very passionate about mental health and suicide prevention as it relates to the Black and express our emotions, as well as my LGBT community. And so being passionate about it, sometimes we're pouring into other people because we get to pour into ourselves.
Absolutely.
And my question to the panel is what ways do you remember to recharge, refill, so you can
take that. We'll have one person take it.
I leave everywhere at 2 o'clock. Let's go home. That's it.
It's
Like,
individual. You gotta figure out what it is for
It could
you.
be
You gotta-
exercise,
yeah,
diet,
like,
Sleep.
Netflix and
Go to
chill.
sleep.
You know,
Go to
whatever is your
therapy.
thing.
Yeah.
It's
it's
shit.
like, it can't be too weird for you. It's like
Right.
whatever your thing is. And a lot of that, sometimes if you don't pay attention, will be the thing that you're suppressing, the thing that is just your thing. You can suppress that out and end up needing to fill that space with other stuff. So,
And what's gonna make you smile,
not
right?
that I'm a doctor, and I'm
Get
just saying
those
this is my
endorphins
thought.
going. Thank you, great question. Next question.
New face. I just want to say thank you, Shanti, for opening up this platform.
Thank you for always supporting online.
Been to many of the events, and I just want to speak on placing what you're doing to me is placing value into mental health. How you said how you look at other people and their successes. I place my value in mental health, and I just want to kind of see not it be a trend, but something that's lasting. I just want to say
From your mouth to God's ears.
place the value into mental health because that part sees any financial gain and any materialism. So I want to say thank you. And how do we kind of change the tide and place the value?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of what, I really feel like damn near Clark Kent. Like, I might be in sweats and sneakers and then gotta do my best change in the telephone booth or office and go into a boardroom. But I've been hired to speak like through the NBA, the NFL. I'm doing work in Silicon Valley, Georgia Power, colleges. Like, I am on a freaking grind to change this conversation. And it's not about me, but this is how serious I am about it. And the fact that I have, peers in this room that I work with in the entertainment industry and on this sharing this stage with me means so much because it is real. And people are suffering. The World Health Organization, over the next 20 years is laying out a plan talking about how we're gonna deal with our mental health. Because people get stressed out. It's a crisis. So, and even think about natural disasters, right? They talked about the rate of Hispanic suicides after Hurricane Maria. Like, it's so many different things that could trigger. And we didn't even have enough time to talk about triggers. But people think, oh, that's that over there. That's that thing called mental health. Somebody told me, oh, I don't know much about mental health. Well, that's crazy. You need to learn about it because we all have mental health.
And let me
And it
speak
could be
on-
the loss of a parent, a spouse, a loved one, a divorce, or a loss of a job, or relationship breakup. That anything could send you in another space mentally. And so the more that we can educate and get people to normalize it, the better.
You have to be consistent.
Right.
I just wanted to speak on advocacy. You talked about putting value in mental health. People with mental illness don't routinely go down to their local county commission meetings or their city council meetings or call up their senator or their representative and say, I want money allocated to education about mental health, or I want money allocated so that people can get mental health treatment. You have to advocate. There are people knocking down the door in Washington getting what they want because they organize, they mobilize, and they advocate. And I think that's a space where we're behind as a community. So that's
Next
important.
up.
How many people here are here because you can't, there's someone, a relative, a loved one, a friend that you care about, that you're trying to help bring awareness to them, or you're trying to come here to identify if you have a problem yourself? Because we come to learn too, we come to learn from people's experiences. I just wanted to say that too.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Simone, co-owner of Anything Vegan, chef and nutritionist.
Nice.
And I'm currently doing some groundbreaking research over at Abrams in the area of mental wellness,
Oh,
prevention,
fantastic.
mental wellness strategy. So this, can't overstate, how
We got talking for this.
Absolutely, right? And so my question is based upon, for my research for the panel, from the clinical side, when someone comes to you and you've identified these symptoms, how often in that conversation or in that diagnosis is a conversation of getting your levels checked, making sure vitamin D, vitamin B12, vitamin
That's a
C,
great
all of
point.
these things are is that part of the
Yep.
conversation? And
I always recommend a medical doctor, right, that I can do this side, but actually I work on teams with medical doctors that we're tag teaming all the things from all sides to make sure we have all the rule outs.
What I would add to that is, as a physician, we want to be guided by the science. So I'm not necessarily going to recommend a particular vitamin level get checked if I don't believe there's science to support that particular level being relevant. What we do have is a general conversation about healthy eating, going vegan is a great option. Make sure you get your protein. I'm sure you know how to tell people to do that. But having a balance, and there are particular blood levels that can check, and that can impact neurological functioning. So that is part of the assessment, but we have to be careful now. We know there are people out there who will tell you that this vitamin or that vitamin is going to solve all the problems in your life, and it just doesn't tend to work that way. So we want to be guided by the science.
Thank you. Absolutely. We'll talk after this for sure. Thank you so much.
On the other side.
Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. Oh, I didn't realize it was
Left
straight.
side.
My bad. Okay. Thank you.
They are
That's a
the
different
biggest
animal.
provider of mental health services. Let me take that one because it goes back to what I was talking about, advocacy. His medicine got changed because it wasn't on the formulary for that particular jail. These things cost money. And so if they have an agreement with a couple of particular drug makers for specific medicines at 40, 50% discounts, that's going to be, those are going to be the
Sometimes,
options.
excuse my language.
Those are going to be the options that you have. So that's why his medicine got changed. Now, many of us don't know how the process works. Many times there's a process that you can go through to get an exemption or an exception for a particular medicine that's not a preferred medication. So becoming aware and educated about that, especially if you have a family member who's ill. There's no management of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia without medications. You can manage anxiety and depression potentially and not have to take medicine. If you don't stay on your medicine with those two conditions, you may be okay for a little while, but those symptoms are going to come back. So the family has to get educated. You have to know what medicines he's on. You have to go down and demand that he stay on, he be given those medicines and be given an access to the process. But it does go back to advocacy. These medicines are not cheap. Some of these antipsychotics can cost $1,000 a month. And so you got to learn about the process.
And a way to learn to advocate as family members is NAMI.org.
Yeah, I was just
National
gonna say
Alliance
that.
on Mental Illness.
Mental
Like,
Health
that's
They have
what
support
America.
groups and everything.
They connect you to legislation, they get you to the Capitol, Mental Health of Georgia.
They about to kick us out. They started late. Y'all started late. We got to at least have one more question. All right, one last question. Okay.
If you work at Google, you get daycare. Like I'm saying, it's a company. It's a company that makes a lot of money off of your effort. But it depends on what you demand from them. A lot of times we look at these companies and all this stuff as things that we're there, we can possibly get them. But if you look at it from a basic standpoint, like even what the doctor was saying, these medicines cost, no, they make thousands of dollars. So at the end of the day, you got to know where the power is going. If you follow the money, you can figure out mostly anything, right? So if you can go to those companies and saying, look, we supply this much money, but you have to go as a we. I say you, but we have to go as a us, so that people understand it's serious, it's something we really care about. And because otherwise, if they can get you for a chain or a watch, they will.
Thank you. One thing I'd like to say in terms of resources, Music Cares is kind of like the foundation arm of the Grammys, and so a lot of people don't know about that organization, but for artists and creatives, you can reach out to Music Cares, and sometimes they can help cover some of those costs for you if you need to get some help. Also, follow us on Instagram at Silence to Shame. We also have a podcast on iTunes. We just interviewed Bobby Brown. Vision and I are proud of that. We talked to him about self-love, but we interview everyday people, licensed healthcare professionals. I know, well, it was on the phone, but it was good. But we're gonna get CeeLo next. But my point is, we're in the community doing the work. Also, follow us on Facebook. We post a lot of helpful articles on Facebook. Facebook is just primarily articles that we take from, you know, different resources within the community. Also, I just released my book, shameless plug, Silencing My Shame. I'm selling the book later. Thank you. I cried like the whole book, but I got it out, and I'm glad to tell the story. But I am just so proud of this panel here today. The fact that the room is crowded, we're talking about mental health, we're talking about substance abuse and hip hop. It doesn't stop here. Please keep it going. If you like what you heard today, please use the hashtag Silence the Shame. And Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, October 10th, is World Mental Health Day, and we're launching a campaign called Flaws That Bind. Hashtag Flaws That Bind. So we want people to post like celebrating your imperfections, and it is okay. So we're going to combat against perfectionism and bullying and everything that we don't like about social media, right? That's harming our young folks as well as people our age. So we're going to let our flaws unite us. We're going to take time, save a life, and silence the shame. Give it up for KP, CeeLo Green, Dr. Abrams,